On Earth, nothing was working out, and I wanted to get the hell out of there.
You're applying to be an expendable? You read through the paperwork?
Yeah. I should have read through it. They made me work my ass off, giving me one shitty mission after another.
You're an expendable! You're here to be expended!
Every time I died, they just printed me out again. Everyone asks, what's it feel like to die? But Nasha, she's always loved me. That's when everything changed.
In the case of multiples, we exterminate every individual.
Which body goes first? One at a time is twice the fun.
You don't look like you're printed out. You're just a person.
It's not your fault. This is a fight to the death.
The simple fact is, we're in a state of war. And our survival is in the balance.
I got a job to do.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone, where we love talking about movies and more. Today I have a movie review for you for the new Robert Pattinson starring film Mickey 17. This is directed by Bong Joon-ho, released in theaters a couple weeks ago. Just now getting a chance to review it, but before we get any further into this video, I want to ask you guys to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos go live on this channel. When you guys do that, it always helps me out and I greatly appreciate it. Now, let's talk about the plot.
A disposable employee is sent on a human expedition to colonize the ice world Nefine. After one iteration dies, a new body is regenerated with most of his memories intact.
All right, so Mickey 17, what was good about this movie? This was one of my most anticipated movies of the entire year. It actually made it into my top 5 most anticipated films of the 2025 film season, so I've been super excited to check this movie out. While I will say I did really enjoy the film, it didn't quite meet my expectations, so it wasn't necessarily a disappointing experience, but it wasn't quite as good as I was hoping for. But what was good? Let's just point out the fact that Robert Pattinson has to play multiple versions of himself, and at one point in the film, he's acting directly opposite of himself, and these two versions of himself have very differing personalities, and I thought he did an amazing job with this. You know, sometimes we'll have to see actors play off of themselves. I think of Oscar Isaac in the Moon Knight series, or I think of Split with James McAvoy, not necessarily playing off of himself, but having to play multiple different characters within himself. This is a different case. It's a little different than those instances. Here, I think it worked really, really well. The Mickey 17 and Mickey 18, the two versions of Mickey, they are both very similar to each other and very different to each other, have very different characteristics, but they also work very well off of each other. It's weird when an actor has great chemistry with themselves, but Robert Pattinson had great chemistry with himself. He did an amazing job, and I thought that was one of the better aspects of Mickey 17. I think Bong Joon-ho had a great vision for this film, and I will say he really swung for the fences in this movie, and I got to at least applaud him for doing that, for taking some big swings, some big risks, and when directors do that, I find it at least interesting. This is not a boring movie at all, and I had a good time at the theater, so I will say that he at least gave me a good movie-going experience. And I do recommend, if you haven't seen Mickey 17, go ahead and do yourself a favor, go see this movie. If you've been looking forward to it, if you've been hearing anything that's been a little negative about the movie, just go ahead and see it. It is good overall. I think overall you will enjoy yourself. So if you've been looking forward to seeing this movie, go ahead and do yourself a favor and go see this movie in theaters right now. It's supposed to be hitting digital about 18 days after it was released in theaters. That's a pretty short window of time. It'll still stay in theaters for a little bit longer than that, but before it hits home video, go see it in theaters exclusively right now. I'm telling you, it will be worth your time if you've been looking forward to seeing this movie. And the supporting cast was really good. Steven Yeun, of course, I knew him first as Glenn in The Walking Dead. He's the voice of Invincible right now on the Amazon series Invincible. And he's had a lot of great indie films that he's been a part of recently, and it's another guy that I always love to see on screen. You know, he doesn't play the nicest guy in this movie, but he does bring some interesting stuff to the role that he plays here in the film. Mark Ruffalo was also quite interesting to watch. This kind of dictator congressman guy who's failed in the US, and so as they're making their trek across the galaxy to a new planet, he's thinking he can kind of rebrand himself and remake himself. Just a slimy, awful, terrible person, but very captivating to watch. Mark Ruffalo had fun with this role. You could tell a lot of the actors, this was one where everybody could just have fun. Everybody could bring something interesting to their part, to their role in this film. This is a movie that allows everybody to be creative. Toni Collette, who I saw her recently in Juror number 2 last year, and then of course now here in Mickey 17, very different characters that she plays. You see the range, so I love that when you can see an actor break away from something you've seen them play before. Robert Pattinson playing a very different character here than what he played in Batman, or what he played in Tenet, or what he played in Good Time, or what he played in a lot of other roles that he's been a part of. Mark Ruffalo, of course, we know him as the Hulk in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then he gets to play these other characters in these independent projects. This kind of feels like an independent film, but with a big budget. So it's a big budget independent film. That's kind of what we got here with Mickey 17. These actors, they all get a chance to play something different from what we've seen them as before. I think that's kind of the case with every actor in this movie. They're all playing something that I haven't seen of them before. And so I thought that was really cool. It made the movie more engaging for that. It made it more interesting. Bong Joon-ho was able to bring different elements out of these actors that I haven't experienced before, haven't seen before, and he showed off and showcased the range that these actors can have. And I don't think there was a weak player in this film at all. As far as the acting is concerned, I was really impressed with what everybody brought to the table in this movie. The production design was really cool. The planet, although it's a little desolate, kind of like an ice planet, reminds you of Hoth from Star Wars a lot of the times, but it really worked. The production design, especially on the spaceship, everything feels otherworldly, but everything also feels very real because it does stem from our own reality. So I really like the production design in this. Nothing felt fake, nothing felt unfinished. It all felt polished. It all felt real. It felt like a world you could walk into and be a part of. And so the vision for this film, I think it really worked. I love the design, the character work, the acting, all of that came together beautifully, and I think that worked very, very well. But I do have some things that kind of draw this film back. So let's go ahead and jump into what was mixed about Mickey 17. All right, what was mixed about Mickey 17? For me, it's the premise of the film. This movie sells itself as being one thing, and then it kind of changes about halfway through. I'm going to kind of tell you this out the gate, so not necessarily to spoil it, but to warn you going into it, so you don't have any kind of preconceived expectations or different expectations going into this film like I had, because I think that's where my disappointment level came in, because I thought this movie was going to be one thing, and then as it gets further on into the plot, it becomes something else. And the trailers kind of hinted at the change in plot, but not enough to where I think they should have to let the audience know what they were really getting themselves into. So this movie really starts to kind of dive into what is the meaning of individuality? What is the meaning of someone having a soul? Robert Pattinson plays these multiple versions of himself. The expendable program is not meant to do that. Cloning is illegal. Now that there are two versions of himself, which one has the right to live? Which one has the right to die? And it dives into these elements of individuality and a very high concept stuff. And then it changes about halfway through into what does it mean to inhabit somebody else's world, inhabit somebody else's planet. When there's a native species to a population, it talks about the rights that they would have versus the people coming in. Who is the actual alien here? Is it the people that have come to the planet as the inhabitants of the planet already? And there's some interesting storytelling where that is concerned, but it changes about halfway through, being the story about individuality and what's the meaning of soul and spirit. Does a person have a right to live or die? Who's more important than another? And then it changes to another really interesting and important plot, more high-thinking concepts, but it kind of detracts from what I think the film was sold as and what the film started out to be. I think Bong Joon-ho wanted to make two different films and put them here into one film, and I think one detracts over the other. Now, it doesn't bring the film down in any sense, I don't think. It just kind of left me wanting more of one plot when I was starting to get another plot handed to me, and so I would have loved to have followed more of the cloning, the individuality aspects of the film. What does it mean to be human? That kind of stuff. And we kind of lose that when we start changing the plot, talking about colonizing and inhabiting somebody else's world and then imposing your rule on them. That's also interesting storytelling, but it's not what the film was initially sold as, at least for what I got from the trailers. I thought it was going to be more of what the first plot was versus what the second plot was. That's where I think the film got a little lost, and I think the movie could have been a little bit more focused for that, and I think it becomes a little unfocused as we start to change plots and directions about halfway through the film. All right, what didn't work? What was bad about Mickey 17? What didn't work for me necessarily? The ending of the film. The ending of the film isn't necessarily confusing, but there's some elements that are brought in. Robert Pattinson's character, Mickey 17, he has this whole dream vision sequence at the end of the movie. Again, I'm not spoiling anything for you, so I'm going to leave that for a surprise for you when you get to the movie. I don't think that quite worked for me. Kind of get what they were going for, but then it kind of doesn't have any meaning at the end of the movie. There's just a lot of stuff that needed to work that didn't. I'm saying bad, but this is also more of a major nitpick for me, in that this film is just super, super unfocused when it comes to maybe not necessarily the third act, but the epilogue, and then things just kind of start to unwind and unravel, and then the film ends. And so there is resolve to the characters that we've been following, but I don't think it quite came together the way that I had hoped for. This movie starts off super, super strong, and the first act is super, super good, really entertaining, really engaging, and then we get into the second act. It kind of starts to lose itself, starts to transform into something else, and then we get into the final act, and then it just kind of starts to lose some steam. Then we get into that epilogue, and then everything just kind of starts to unravel. So I think it wanted to try to do too many things. There were too many things that this film is trying to do, and I really wish that this film had been more focused than it ended up being. I did really enjoy the movie. I do recommend, if you have not seen it, go ahead and watch this movie. Again, I was trying to be careful with spoilers, just trying to give you some realistic expectations going into Mickey 17, but I definitely recommend, if you have been looking forward to seeing this movie, if you've been wanting to see this movie, go ahead and do yourself a favor and go out to the theater and watch this movie. I still recommend it. It's my second favorite movie of the 2025 season I've seen so far. Black Bag still beats it out for me for the movies I've seen from this year, but Mickey 17 was still a fun watch at the theater. The character work was really good. The production design was really good. All the actors brought something very interesting to the screen that I haven't seen from any of these actors before. The performances were really good, and Bong Joon-ho was able to bring that out of these actors, and I gotta applaud him for the vision he had for this film. He really swung for the fences, and I always love it when a director can do that. Robert Pattinson was a standout in this movie. He did a great job playing multiple versions of himself, was able to bring something to the table that I hadn't seen from him before, and I thought he did a great job in the role of Mickey. Now, if I'm going to give this movie a rating, it's got to be a 4 out of 5 or a B+ on the letter scale. A very good movie, not quite as good as I was hoping it was going to be, but still an enjoyable experience at the end of the day. If you've seen Mickey 17, go ahead and go down in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. Before you go, remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos go live on this channel. When you guys do that, it always helps me out, and I greatly appreciate it. Hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.